The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is Monday, April the 21st, 2025. This is the Monday edition of the Nerdcast News Report. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We are here to talk all things Night 2 of WrestleMania. And overall, it was a good night, but maybe not such a great finish. And, you know, based on kind of how I determine my enjoyment level of a show, the end certainly had a big part of that, but we'll talk about that on this podcast and run down a few other items and kind of talk about where we go from here. What surprises do we expect to see on the Raw and SmackDown after WrestleMania, which will be coming up this week. Joining me in studio on this Monday morning is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Going back through night 2 in preparation for this, I realized, man, I really loved the vast majority of this show. They pretty much knocked it out of the park and then tripped and fell on the way home. Like, I don't really know what happened, but certainly excited to talk more about it.
Yeah, and again, you know, and I've been pretty consistent on this podcast, and even before we started doing this podcast, on my theory on wrestling shows is, you know, you're always going to be remembered by how the show ends. No matter how good of a show you put on, the overall enjoyment level is going to be determined by how you finish. And to me, this is one of the worst WrestleMania main events in history. Certainly in modern history. I think this puts WrestleMania 39 to shame.
Is it a Vegas thing, you think? Like,
it could be, because that was certainly another one.
I was waiting for Hogan to come out and beat Cena at the end.
Honestly, that would have not even been as bad an ending as what they ended up going with. It was just really terrible. A terrible match between two guys who were certainly capable of better. A terrible run-in by a celebrity that is a big deal, but was used in such a stupid way, really for no other purpose than for Cody to get his shot back after the cheap shot at Elimination Chamber. It made Cody look terrible. It cheapened Cena's 17th world title, which I don't think the company thought that all the way through, because this is something, in theory, assuming he holds it for a while. Obviously, Randy Orton is knocking on the door on the men's side and Charlotte Flair on the women's side. But assuming you're going to show this video for a few years celebrating this is what you're going to be showing is a really lackluster match that just felt like a giant middle finger to all these fans that paid huge money to sit in the stadium and watch this nonsense. Just a terrible ending to the show. And you just can't help but feel like The Rock's fingerprints are all over the booking of this. It felt like something Vince McMahon would have booked. Felt completely out of place on this card that, like you said, otherwise was really good. Just makes me not even interested in watching Raw tonight, which it's been a while since WrestleMania did that. Just totally disappointing in every way, shape, and form for a product that has done such a better job of not making people look dumb, even in multi-person matches, which we'll talk about later. Has, you know, even when you have to have a match where it's one-sided, even like the Joe Hendry match, like he got his spots in, he didn't look dumb.
I don't know what people were expecting from that, because you're not really going to have Joe Hendry be super competitive against Randy Orton.
No. And I think for the most part, people understood what that was and was okay with it, you know, but the end was just so incredibly disappointing. And I really just cannot get over why somebody signed off on that. And as much as I have been a big proponent of let it play out and wait and see, there's so many other ways you could have got there, and you took the worst possible way to get there. And The Rock couldn't even be bothered to show up to at least give it some sort of star power.
Yeah.
From a wrestling standpoint.
I don't think having Travis Scott as his proxy does anything for the vast majority of fans.
No,
honestly,
not at all. And again, just terrible all the way around.
I think I liked the beginning of it. The problem is it never got out of the beginning of it.
Yeah.
Like, I think Cena's entrance was spot on. That was fine. I think the idea of him like being like ultra methodical and slow was fine. I think what they missed, and I assume probably Cena didn't want to go this route because he's ultimately still known as a good guy. I feel like something should have happened that just like flipped a switch on him and he just became ultra brutal to Cody. And I feel like we never got that. We did get the turnbuckle spot, but that was really about it. I feel like there was another gear that match never got to. And then you had the finish, which just completely missed the mark in every way possible. You know, like you mentioned, they've done such a good job of not making people look stupid. The only time in recent memory when they've done that, it's involved The Rock and Cody, where they just would have Cody do something totally like nonsensical. And they don't realize that also makes the fans look stupid.
Yeah.
Like you're telling me that this guy who knows that John Cena hates him and wants nothing more than to just ruin not only Cody's title reign, but wrestling for people in general. Why would Cody second guess using the belt on Cena?
Yeah, after already having been hit with it.
Yeah.
In the build up to it. Like, why would you not? And I don't think any of his fans would have blamed him for that.
No.
It's just, again, it just makes him look dumb. And, you know, I was laying in bed. I'm glad we didn't do this last night because as aggravated as I am about the whole thing, I was way more aggravated about it last night. Having sat through that whole show to get to that nonsense, and that's how you decide to end it. But to me, as I was laying there in bed, I was thinking, you know, you had potentially a perfect opportunity to use somebody on your roster to counteract Travis Scott in that situation, and that guy is R-Truth. Like, you have R-Truth on your roster, who is a hip-hop guy, who is a John Cena fan, who is conflicted about John Cena's current direction, who you could have had come out and then either have him side with Cena because he's such a Cena guy that he just believes in John and he attacks Cody.
That would have been pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, or you have him defend Cody and attack Travis Scott and turn his back on John Cena. Like, then it's at least a wrestler that it's somebody who's involved in your finish. Like, again, there's just so many other ways they could have got there. I think saving Cena's heel turn for WrestleMania would have been a better finish because then it's just desperate Cena has to do whatever he can to win because he's so desperate to win.
But that's a problem where you have the build up to WrestleMania where you're not sure if Cena's going to be around or The Rock's going to be around because I think for that you want them both there regularly to play up the who's going to side with The Rock, who's going to sell out, and you don't get that, unfortunately. And I think The Rock's lack of participation just further adds to what felt like a truly just uninspired effort. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know who this was for. I don't, like I mentioned before, I know I'm not a young guy and I don't like terrible music, so I don't get Travis Scott at all. And I'm okay with the thought that he's a huge star, so he's involved, but him like walking down to the ring as slow as humanly possible just for that level of involvement. Who gets excited about that? I just don't know.
Yeah. And, you talked about not making people look dumb. The other people this makes look dumb is everybody that Cody has beaten since last year's WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Cody beat everybody. He beat all the biggest stars. And
Cena hasn't beaten anybody up until the Elimination Chamber.
In singles match in 7 years, I think they said.
Something like that, yeah.
Like, this guy hasn't beaten anybody. Like, he's losing to Austin Theory at WrestleMania in matches that weren't even competitive.
And that's why I think you needed that extra gear out of Cena where he just turned totally diabolical, because the Cena that was losing to Austin Theory was still good guy Cena that wouldn't do anything just vile.
Yeah.
I think he needed that against Cody, and we didn't see it.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I get the vision of where they're going to go. It's going to probably be he's going to come out tonight and talk about how he's got so many contractually obligated dates, so he will show up for those because he doesn't want to get sued.
Yeah.
And basically it becomes this gauntlet of the top stars trying to beat Cena to get the belt off of him by the end of the year. So it'll be Orton first, probably at Backlash, and you'll go from there. I get that where they're going to go with it. Again, it's just how you get there. You take the guy who's your QB1. You talk about him all weekend. He's the top merch mover. He's the guy that runs your company. He's the guy that what do you do with him now? Like, he just made him look like a chump.
You better have something huge planned for him, or, I mean, the crowd was already pretty split during the match, if not pro Cena to begin with. The last thing you want to do in that situation is make the guy that you're supposed to cheer for look like a moron.
Yeah.
And you did it.
Like, you're running the risk of ruining what you have with Cody Rhodes for this short-term storyline with John Cena. And
it's why they've had so many issues over the years during the Vince era coming up with a compelling babyface, because you ultimately have them do things that make you not want to root for them.
yeah, you cut their legs out from under them, and I just don't understand that. And just a disaster of a main event, a disaster of a way to end the card on what was overall a good weekend. And when CM Punk said, I think the women should main event, if he had any idea that this was coming, he was 100% right.
Yeah.
Because that women's match, that Intercontinental 4-way, those were all better choices to main event than this nonsense. I get from a star power standpoint why you had to go this route, but man,
it worries me that main event had no concern over following what came before it.
Yeah.
Because everything else on the card was just leaps and bounds more entertaining.
Yeah, for sure. And, I just it's such a misstep that, like I said, it feels like Vince booked it. It feels like The Rock had a hand in it because it was so bad. And, I think this is more indicative of the way The Rock feels about wrestling booking.
And the fans.
And the fans.
I know better than you. Just shut up and enjoy it.
Yeah. And it was just terrible.
But I think that's indicative of entertainment in general, where it's, if you don't like it, that's because you're awful.
Yeah.
Like, we know what we're doing. Just shut up and consume product and wait for the next product and consume it and go on and so on and so forth.
Again, WWE talks about it all the time. They're in the entertainment business, which means they're competing with all things entertainment, sports, other pro wrestling companies, not doing anything, just going outside and touching grass. Like, they're competing with all those things for your time and money. And I feel like the messaging's gotten a little more defensive this weekend from the company. I don't like the critics. I don't like, all this other stuff. You're hearing these messages that are very Vince-esque. And again, that's fine while you keep selling these tickets. As soon as the fans feel like you're insulting them, they're not going to pay this kind of money to go see this, and your sales are going to start dropping. And, we'll see. I mean, again, they just did Monster Gates this weekend, so it's going to be fine. But, we'll go from here.
Everything else about this was so positive.
Yeah.
It's just, how do we get... at this point, how do we get past the Cena retirement run, and what do we do after that?
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame. That shouldn't be the way we're looking at this last year with Cena. And
no,
I was on board with this heel turn because I thought it was something different for his character.
And I've liked his character up to this point.
Yeah. But everything about this match was bad, and I couldn't get over how bad it was. And like I said, it definitely hurt my impression of the overall event, because it was the last image from the event was this match, which is just a real shame, because as Mike said, the rest of night 2, by and large, was really good. And we'll go through quickly some of the stuff that happened. Let's start with the first match, that women's triple threat for the World Championship. And it was Io Sky, as the booking kind of led you to believe should happen, beating Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley to win and retain her title. To me, this was about as good as these three women can do. It was the perfect scene setter for the night, and rightfully probably should have main evented, because it was one of the best matches of the entire weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I wish that the actual main event would have applied the same level of effort that the three ladies did here in the opening match. I was so worried about this, because whenever they're telling a story where the correct answer is so blatantly obvious, you always fear some sort of swerve or them subverting what you think's going to happen. And the way the story was told, with them disrespecting Sky to the degree they had, there was no other way but for her to win. And thankfully, the match delivered on all fronts. I thought it was a great match. It's right up there with some of the other matches last night that were just outstanding. Kind of excited to see what's next for Sky, because, you have a lot of up-and-coming women that I think would be really good in the ring with her. I'd kind of like to see Belair and Ripley move on to something else at this point, and just kind of let Sky kind of run that side of the division, bring up some of the women from NXT, and see what you can do. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of potential there, especially as Sky being a bit of a smaller wrestler. You've got some smaller wrestlers from NXT that certainly could come up and fill that challenger role. I thought this was as good as you could do it. I thought this was really outstanding, and it was a great way to kick off the night. Like I said, even though there was a lot of other good matches, it felt like that was just about the peak of the night was that first match, despite the fact there were other really good matches after that. Drew McIntyre beating Damian Priest in a Sin City Street fight felt like a match that Drew McIntyre kind of needed to get that big win. He's kind of hasn't really had the best luck at Kerry King of Slayer there to play Priest out, which was really cool. This wasn't maybe as violent as I thought it was going to be, but overall I thought it was a very solid match between those two.
Yeah, that they didn't take it on the road as far as like getting out in the crowd, which I thought they might do. I was a little surprised about that. The number of unique weapons wasn't quite as high maybe as I thought it would be. But anytime these two dudes fight, it's entertaining. There were enough spots where I'm just like, ow, that couldn't have felt good, where I didn't feel like they left anything out of the match necessarily. Yeah, I could have seen this going either way, but I do think McIntyre, more so than Priest, is kind of in that Rollins stage where, hey, it's time you have a pretty big year again because you've kind of been the GOAT more often, not in the greatest of all time sense, but in the less positive sense as of late. And I think they could do some really cool stuff with him. That Doom game that sponsored it looks really cool.
Yeah.
Having Kerry King involved is also really cool. So, yeah, I mean, the night so far is going pretty well, not going to lie.
Yeah, and it continues because Dominic Mysterio is going to win the Intercontinental title in a fatal four-way, which the fans were completely behind. Huge pop when he hit the frog splash and got the 1, 2, 3 and celebrated. And, we knew this was coming for really the last couple of years with the level of hate that Mysterio was getting, that it was only a matter of time before the fans basically did a 180. Because they love to hate him, that they also love him, and they want to see him succeed. And, he's, to their credit, they've done everything with him pretty much exactly right. They've allowed him to be his own guy and his own character. They've got him away from his dad. And, he's got a championship to show for it, and the fans behind him. And it'll be very interesting to see how they book this going forward. Do they lean into his face turn? Do they have the Judgment Day kick him out? Do they, does the Judgment Day turn face as a group? Like, lots of different ways you can go with that, but it's that was just a really outstanding match between four really outstanding wrestlers.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure how they were going to play this. Initially, I thought that the drama between he and Balor would have kept either one of them from winning, but I can't complain with how they executed this. I thought the ending was outstanding, and the match itself was really good. I get the feeling Braun Breaker's going to be moving up. He might even be one of the first opponents for Jey Uso. We'll see what happens with that. I'm interested to see what the Judgment Day has going on now, because obviously it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Mysterio to split from Liv and Raquel. Like, I imagine they're going to stay as some sort of group. You have no idea what's going to happen with Carlito, but you still kind of feel like Balor and McDonough are going to be the odd people out once he's back and healthy. But I'm here for it. I think Judgment Day, for a group that when it first started, I thought was just dead on arrival, through removing Edge, bringing in who all they brought in, even losing two of the biggest stars after that, they've maintained steam, and they're still one of the more entertaining parts of Raw every week.
Yeah, for sure. Really interested to see how they go forward. Again, congrats to Dominic Mysterio. I think he's well on his way to being a white-hot babyface.
They've nailed the execution with him.
Yeah.
His character has been just tremendous.
And, he's got that Eddie Guerrero thing going where I don't think he's ever going to be, like, stand by the rules type of babyface. No. He's always going to be, lie, cheat, and steal, and I think it works out perfectly. Randy Orton had his open challenge next. A lot of rumors about who that was going to be. And again, I feel like they kind of hit the nail on the head about choosing an opponent, because you knew it was going to be somebody that was going to be able to take a loss and it wasn't going to hurt them, because there was no way Orton was going to lose that match. And it was Joe Hendry, the TNA World Champion, who got a huge pop when his music played, got a little offense in, got a memorable RKO moment with the camera zoomed in on him. So he kind of hit the whole Randy Orton experience.
Yeah, that was perfect.
It couldn't have done any better, and super happy for the guy to get his WrestleMania moment.
Yeah, for sure. It's weird because I feel like there were kind of stories that had popped up kind of suggesting that they fumbled a bit with the Hendry involvement, where supposedly they wanted him like losing to the Miz, and TNA didn't want that to happen. Just enough to make you think like, oh, maybe he's just not going to be involved in WWE moving forward. And this totally caught me off guard. It makes so much more sense than to just plug in some returning wrestler into that spot to take a loss to Orton. Like that's a weird way to re-debut somebody. If it's someone like a Rusev or even like Black, like that wouldn't have made a whole lot of sense, especially with them teasing Black's arrival in a couple days. This was great. I think it's right up Henry's alley as far as just having a ridiculously entertaining, goofy spot. Randy Orton years ago, he didn't seem like the kind of dude that would be able to like play this up, and like his personality has reached some level that I didn't think he was capable of like 10 years ago, and because of that, it's just super entertaining spot. Him kind of doing the Henry pose at the end was great. I just super happy for Henry to get a WrestleMania moment, and kind of what you'd expect would happen. Like the moment was kind of too big for him. He poses a bit too long, and gets RKO'd.
Yeah, for sure. Perfect. Well executed. Happy for Joe Hendry. I think it was a great moment for him and a great showcase for TNA. Get the feeling they'll pick up some viewers out of this, which I think is always the goal when you do something like that. And, maybe the forgotten company on this WrestleMania weekend with all the AAA talk, but great stuff overall. 2 matches before the main event left, Logan Paul and AJ Styles. Very solid 18-minute match between those two, as you would expect. Paul gets the win by pinfall after Styles refuses to cheat, even though Karrion Kross tried to get him to cheat.
You got to start listening to this guy.
He clearly knows what he's talking about. And then the women's tag title match, Valkyria picks Becky Lynch, who returns. They win the titles. So, of course, they'll be on NXT Tuesday night to defend those titles. I still really feel bad for Bayley. I get what they were trying to do. The storyline makes a lot of sense from a lot of different angles, but it always sucks when you get taken off of WrestleMania at the last minute. But just overall thoughts on those 2 matches, because, I mean, they were both very solid matches. I think they got done what they needed to get done, and they were the last couple good things on the show. Yeah,
I thought the Paul and Styles match was great. Anytime Karrion Kross and Scarlett are on the television, that's not a bad thing either. I enjoy Logan Paul on my television. I think the dude is crazy talented. Like, you can think what you want about the guy, but he delivers. He's just so good in the ring, and putting him in there with Styles, who's obviously one of the best of all time. It was a really good match, and I wonder what's next for both. I kind of want to see where the Styles and Cross story picks up and carries on. And you just wonder, is Paul ever going to be around enough to really have a meaningful feud for either mid-card or main title? Because I kind of feel like everything they've done with him so far, when he's in the ring, it's great, but he's just not around enough to really get engaged with a story.
And that's the issue I have with him. It's, he comes in, he drops in, he does really cool stuff, he has a good match, and then it's just like you don't see him for 6 months or 3 months. And, I get that's kind of what they're using him for, is this attraction, like the Brock Lesnar spot. But at the same time, it's like,
when you have too many people that occupy that spot, it's hard to feel connected to what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And it's hard for me to even think about him in a title situation because he's just not around. And last thing you need is another champion who's not on the show. Like, they've done that enough over the years that it's not enjoyable.
And as far as the tag match goes, it was fine. I understand the Lynch connection to Valkyria and that making sense there. But honestly, I thought Bayley was too big for the tag titles. So I certainly think Becky Lynch's return to wrestle for the tag titles feels like kind of wasting her return. I assume ultimately she's going to end up aligning with Rollins and Heyman. I don't know how we're going to get there, but again, it feels like we're just using the tag titles as some sort of vehicle to have people turn heel on each other. It's kind of a strange thing, and Liv and Raquel were great champions. I would have liked to have that continue on, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and again, as I said last night, clearly part of it is to move tickets for the NXT live show on Tuesday. And, of course, you have the Tatum Paxley tie with Lyra Valkyria, so there's a storyline there as well. But, yeah, I mean, match was fine.
Yeah.
got the job done. I don't think Lynch is long for the tag division or the tag titles, but we'll see how
I would
long.
imagine not.
They
And Valkyria is the mid-card champion, so
she's got other things to do as well. So that kind of takes care of the card from last night. Just one quick bullet point on surprises, because it is the Raw after WrestleMania, SmackDown after WrestleMania, and as disgruntled as I am at the moment, I'll certainly at least keep track of what happens this week on those two shows. I guess, we kind of have an idea Aleister Black's coming back, presumably Friday, I think was the date in his last video, to line up with SmackDown. There's a lot of rumors about Rusev coming back with Lana. It'll be curious to see kind of what surprises we get this week, because it does feel like WWE is going to try to create a little buzz with some returning people, and maybe some surprises nobody's talking about coming up this week.
Yeah, and I don't even know what to consider as far as speculation on what the surprises are going to be beyond what you mentioned. We know Aleister Black is returning. All signs point to Rusev being re-signed. Where do you plug him in? How soon do you maybe even throw in a TNA or AAA person into the mix? Do you do that on Raw or SmackDown, or do you keep that kind of at the NXT level for now? I mean, you are kind of building toward this Worlds Collide event in June, so I don't know what's going on with that. And beyond the surprises, I'm just curious how you set the stage for what's essentially the next season of WWE, if you will. How do you make a lot of the big plot points? How do you kind of carry them on to the next step? I mean, the main events from night 1 and night 2 have a lot of unanswered questions. I'm super excited about everyone involved in the main event of night 1. I thought that was great. I'm excited for Rollins to be aligned with Heyman and what they do with that. But I mean, obviously Cody's going to be the huge question mark. How do you salvage his character? Where do you take it to still keep him at the top level and not just seem like a tool at this point?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. One thing I would not be surprised to see is Joe Hendry in some sort of tag match tonight on Raw.
Yeah.
In the past, it would be like him and Orton would tag up against somebody. I don't know if they'll go that route, but I feel like maybe a tag match against Judgment Day or something where he can get the win to have that. Hey, he salvaged the weekend by getting his pinfall
Make him
win.
look truly competitive against somebody.
Yeah, so I could see that for sure. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different surprises, especially with the other partnerships. And again, people potentially coming in. I mentioned her over the weekend on the Discord. It kind of feels like it wouldn't surprise me if Paige doesn't show back up in WWE at some point. Thought she might be actually a legit surprise for the tag team match. Yeah. And again, some ties there as well. So, she's one I wouldn't be surprised to see show back up, but it'll be interesting to see for sure. WWE always said tries to come up with something wild for the week after WrestleMania, so we'll see if they're able to deliver better than they delivered in the main event match of night 2. Ready for an abbreviated Empire Express today?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's roll to that. A Japanese man has been handed a suspended prison sentence for illegally modifying and selling Nintendo Switch consoles. The 58-year-old man has been welding modified parts to circuit boards. He was also fined approximately $3,500. This news surprise you?
No, not at all. I mean, I know people have been modifying consoles for as long as possible. I feel like maybe we're going to start seeing them cracking down and really going after these people a lot more. I feel like you've seen it more on the software side than you have the hardware up to this point, but I guess nothing surprises me now. The Crunchyroll store has listed an interesting item relating to the original Dragon Ball anime. They've listed the upcoming reissue of Dragon Ball's original vinyl soundtrack. It is scheduled to release on July 25th, and you can pre-order it now for just under $43. Thoughts on that being reissued?
It's pretty cool, honestly. I think that would be something, as a big fan of the original Dragon Ball, I think that would be really cool to pick up, and it's a pretty reasonable price for an import item, so I would think that's going to sell really well and maybe even sell out. Finally, the newest commercial advertising the Nintendo Switch 2 has a familiar face involved in it. Paul Rudd stars in the commercial, which is a throwback to a 1990s ad for the Super Nintendo, which was one of his first acting roles. It was news to me. Was it news to you?
Yeah, I'm sure I probably saw that commercial as a kid.
Yeah.
Never thought about it because I wouldn't have known back in 1990 or 91 who Paul Rudd was. But watching both the commercials side by side is pretty cool, and it's definitely a positive in Nintendo's corner in a time where maybe a lot of the news coming out on their end hasn't been received overly well. Who doesn't like Paul Rudd? The dude is just so likable, and Nintendo definitely needed some kind of positive PR, and there it is.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think you ever turn down that positive PR if you're Nintendo, so good stuff from them. But that is going to wrap things up for this Monday edition of the Nerdcast News Report. Just a reminder, next weekend we got 3 podcasts for you. We'll be back Saturday with another episode of the Nerdcast News Report, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll get back to more nerdy news coming up next weekend, barring some major wrestling news this week. And then 2 music podcasts for you next weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I believe both will be at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. We'll do the music of April the 4th on Saturday and April the 11th on Sunday, so make sure you join us for a busy podcast week next weekend on the Nerdcast Empire. Big thanks to everyone for joining us. Big thanks to Mike for joining me as well. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. And a big thanks to you whenever and wherever you're listening to this. We'll be back with you on Saturday morning for another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.